Now, last week we focused on building your ICP. Obviously, it's not something that's set in stone, something that's always evolving. So refresh it. We do it quarterly. But what we're going to look into this week is target account selection and tiering. So that's going to be the focus for us this week. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
Nice one. Okay. Well, look, over to you. How do you sort of approach this this structure and tiering?
Yeah, well, before we jump into that, I just thought it'd be interesting because obviously you mentioned tiering just then, and sometimes when I mention tiering, I get a bit of a funny look because it's not necessarily a term that people are always familiar with. So I think it's quite important for us to define our terms. And so tiering is just simply the ability to organize something into a systematic and logical way. So when we're going to talk in this episode about target accounts, we'll talk about how we look at each account and which bucket we put it into. So we'll delve into that a little bit later, but I thought it was quite important to mention that now. So obviously the first thing, Alex, when we're looking at target account list building is we've obviously got our ICP, and we talked last week in episode 1 of how you actually build your ICP. So the next step obviously is what we call to formalize your ICP. And by that, what we mean is all that data that you use to design your ICP, you need to now put it into an Excel, create custom fields in your CRM in order to be able to then map back those accounts to that ICP. So in the case of our agency in HubSpot, which is obviously our CRM, we have a whole host of custom fields for our ICP, and then each account then can be obviously can be modified and upgraded and customized in order to actually match that ICP. So if you can actually formalize your ICP, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or whether it's a step further with custom fields, that's a great start. And once you've obviously formalized, you can then actually move to actually finding accounts that can potentially become target accounts. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be a very large list of accounts out there for the kind of products and services that you obviously sell. And you need to then work out which accounts could be potential target accounts. So what we say to our customers is, let's look at your first party data first. Okay, let's look at your CRM, your HubSpot, your Marketo, your Salesforce. Let's look at the accounts that are in there. Let's grab those accounts first. The next step is we say to people, well, let's look at your competitors' customers. Who do they work with? You can scrape that data from their websites. You can talk to your sales teams. You can talk to your partners, etc. You can find that information from a number of public sources. And then the next thing we say is, well, let's look at your competitors, or rather, let's look at your customers' competitors. Okay, so we mentioned your competitors' customers, and then you invert it by saying your customers' competitors. Nice. And then you can keep going from there and build out, and you can look at the ABM tech stack, for example. You can look at what companies are operating in that area, which companies are kind of good fit for you around those sources, which companies are using Engadget, which companies are using Marketo, which companies are using Cognizant, etc. Those are great sources for working out other accounts that may well enter into your target account list. And then there's a whole plethora of other sources. And yourself, Alex, and I, we're both very familiar with these in terms of industry and funding tools, such as G2, such as Crunchbase, such as Cognizant, such as ZoomInfo, etc., who obviously, had a huge IPO the other day. And then you go further, and we've all got LinkedIn. We've all got LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They are great sources to look for accounts that would meet your ICP. And then finally, and obviously we're both really huge fans of this, third-party data sources such as intent data platforms such as Science Nexus, such as Bombora, such as Sixth Sense. By taking all of these sources, this is how you can bring together what is going to be a very large list of accounts. Now at this stage, they're not target accounts, they're just accounts that could potentially become target accounts. So those really for me are the first two steps.
Nice. Okay, I think that's really detailed. So you've got all that gold, I suppose. For me, it's about sort of applying that ICP. So you've got these accounts collated. You've basically got to take the wheat from the chaff, right? As we say in English, sort the valuable from the worthless and the not so valuable. I suppose if you've imported all the above accounts into your CRM, you can apply those. You can sort of filter it. you'll be very surprised to see how many accounts are removed and how many you're sort of left with. Have that focused target account list. Invariable, there'll be kind of too many really. So that's where tiering comes in. There are kind of two ways of building that segmented account list. You have dynamic and static. Right? The dynamic ones are the ones that are going to move maybe weekly, right? Some are going to be just static lists. You might work on a quarterly basis. And regardless which method you use, you're looking for all those attributes that your best customers have in common so that you can create the right list. Use the same criteria as building your ICP and create those accounts to start working, right? So that's how we kind of apply it. So obviously after you've like applied your ICP, the next step, I suppose, is how you like tier your target account. How do you actually put that bit into practice? So tell me how you guys do that. It'd be awesome to know.
Yeah, okay. So let's just remind ourselves why tiering is so important. The reality is that you're going to have a very large list of accounts. Even when you apply your ICP, you're still going to have a very long list of accounts that's going to be very difficult for you as a business to deal with. So that's when the tiering comes in. So the tiering comes in, and it's important because, you know, where are you as a business? Where are you, you know, in your evolution? At what stage are you, and how many, you know, what the resources are available to you as a business? That will obviously dictate the number of accounts that you can target. What kind of campaigns are you looking to run? That will equally dictate the tiering and what really, you know, which accounts you really want to go after. I mentioned earlier about resources. So very typically, you know, a lot of companies, their eyes are always bigger than their stomachs, right? They always want to go after more accounts than they can actually handle. So it's always good if you have the tiering in place. It allows you to have a sense of prioritization, and you can actually push back potentially to your sales director or even to your C-suite and say, look, we need to focus on these accounts. So once you have that, and I think one thing that we find when we're talking to our customers is when you can introduce that kind of language into your business and say, hey, this is a tier 1 account, this is a tier 2 account, this is a tier 3 account, that gets everyone thinking, well, why am I spending so much time on these accounts or these accounts when actually the business really needs to be winning more tier 1s, for example, or indeed tier 2s, whatever your criteria is. So I think those are some of the really key reasons why tiering is so important. So once you go back to your ICP, you grab all that information, your geo information, your industry, your size, your revenue, you look at the geographies that we mentioned before, you know, US, UK, SaaS companies, funding, etc. So you've got all that information now. So now you're ready to actually decide on the tiering criteria, right? So in your case, Alex, how would you approach that?
Yeah, for me, so it's like, how do you know the kind of the perfect ICP is? You know, you sort of share your attributes with your best customers, high customer lifetime value, velocity of deals. Sometimes actually we say, you know, those strategic accounts that are going to help you win new business should be the tier 1s as well. So it's not just the high value ones. Sometimes they might be slightly lower value, but you know, it's going to unlock new industries, for example. Then you kind of tier 2 is accounts that have like a strong ICP fit, slightly lower customer lifetime value, but still like most businesses, this is kind of your bread and butter. So you're kind of not going to spend as much in terms of resources on it, but still really good customers. And then tier 3 accounts, like really good fit, maybe not so much intent, but worth pursuing. Typically, don't invest too much resources, kind of the one-to-many approach. And then you kind of apply those tiers, and you have a really nice approach in terms of how you focus resource, the messaging, how much you're going to put into it, and then you can put it into practice really.
So with that said, Alex, what are we going to talk about next week?
Well, I think from where I see it, we've nailed the ICP, we've got our target account list, it's tiered, we kind of know how to prioritize it. That's kind of like that's usually the real heavy lifting bit. What we need to get into next is like the contact identification. How do you build out what some people call the decision-making unit, the DMU, or buyer personas? Like who do we need to bring into the buying process, and then really target them so that we can get the right people in at the right stages, ideally as early on as possible, and make sure that deal velocity is nice and high. So that's what I'd like to cover next week. How's that sound for you?
Sounds like a plan. Looking forward to it already.